Good morning and thanks for having me. This section is called Artist Analyst, and it's tips to go from intimidated to inspired. And it's really following the journey that I took from someone that's not really involved with data at all to somebody that's entrenched in data in their regular life. So let me start out with just a quick introduction, just to let you know who I am. My name's Sam Pretty, and I've been with Tableau now since 2014 in a number of different roles, but all of them heavily involved in data. All right, so there's a few things that we're going to cover today. And it's kind of broken up into two sections. So one section would be more like soft skills, and the next section is going to be a little bit more hard skills. So thinking about what are some things that I can be doing, and then what are some skills that I need to have. So the first one, tip one, silencio Bruno. Tip two, failure is my favorite method. Tip three, know what you need to succeed. And then we're going to jump into the hard skills from there. So tip four would be structure equals success. And then tip five, know your aggregations. So let's jump in real quick here. And we're going to cover these at kind of a high level. So from the time that we've got, just to make sure that we're able to get through everything. So the first one in the soft skills being silencio Bruno. And I'm going to start with a story. So when I was younger, and it would have been high school, I think it was in high school, I started skateboarding. And I remember I got the board, I had those shoes, I was dressed appropriately, all that kind of stuff, right? But at the time, I still felt like I didn't fit in. It just didn't feel like I was supposed to be there. And they actually even have a word for it in skateboarding. It's called being a poser. And the idea with that is somebody that has all the stuff, but they're not really skateboarding, right? They're there just kind of like living the part, but not doing the actual thing. And I felt like that. I felt like an imposter. I really struggled with that, feeling like I actually fit into it. Now, fast forward to my first role in data, and I worked for a cell phone retailer. And it was my main job. Now, it wasn't the first time that I touched data, but it was my first job where that was like the real focus of what I was doing was with data. And I had to learn on the fly, at the speed of light, to try to make it feel like I actually fit in. And I remember there was this immense pressure to be able to feel like I was at the top of my game with that. And if I wasn't, then it felt like I just didn't fit, or someone was going to see through or understand that I was still learning as I went. And the irony of that is that I had spent years before that working with data for a manufacturing company that I was running at the time. And I was using it for inventory, for our supplies, for how we were doing as a business. But for whatever reason, when it became my main job, it felt like I needed to prove something to someone else or that it wouldn't be believable. And it didn't help, too, that I had a boss that was constantly wanting to question everything that I did or dig into the data. And it was challenging, right? Because there was this constant line of questions of like, well, how did you find that? How do you know that's right? Where did you find the information from? How did you calculate that average? And it was just, for me, it cemented that idea that I was an imposter, that I didn't fit or I didn't belong there. Now, I eventually ended that role and I learned from it, right? It was something that I came away from it with a better understanding of what I needed to work in it. And to be honest, at that point, I decided that I wasn't going to work in data again. I was like, I'm done. And there's a lot of people that go through similar situations, but there's a thing that you need to remember in that is that you don't need to be a data scientist at day one to actually go in and to succeed in that, right? All you really need is curiosity and a willingness to learn. You can learn a lot of this stuff on the fly, and the resources that are out there now are so robust compared to what they used to be that there's a lot of opportunity for you to learn what you need to learn. The second thing is find your people and your style. And that's actually the full tip number one. So I called it silencio Bruno, but find where you fit, basically. The world of data is not limited to one specific type or one specific thing, and there are plenty of ways to get out there and to find something that really does interest you enough that it feels like something you could do on a regular basis. Now, what I always recommend to people too is to take incremental steps, right? Don't try to be this like boil the ocean. That's not my favorite expression, but don't try to do it all at once, right? Do a little bit at a time. And those incremental steps these days means doing a little bit of learning at a time. And there's so much free training out there. So I would encourage you to dig into that. And from a Tableau perspective, I mean, we have a whole data skills program that has resources that are great to bring you from no experience up to being able to function in the world of data. There's also Tableau Public, which we have the ability to go in and use full Tableau without having to pay for it, and then be able to publish your work up and really just get in and try it out. There's also data sets and videos and just learning opportunities there. There's also community resources that give you an opportunity to get in and actually work with the information too. Last thing, DataFam Discovery Kit. If you're not looking at user groups, that's a great place to go to pick up some information quick. And then YouTube, right? I mean, everybody is putting videos on how to do stuff on YouTube these days. So the next piece is what I said failure is my favorite method. And it's not my narrative, but it is my method. So I guess what I'm saying in that is we don't dwell on the fact that we failed at something, but we use it as a learning opportunity, right? And this one's really critical. I have to say that I didn't really understand this as well as I thought I could until I had kids, right? And I would go out with my kids and we would be trying a new sport or whatever. And there was this attitude that, if they weren't like professional the first time they tried it, that they just weren't good at it. Like it wasn't their thing. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, we just started. Like, there's no way you're going to be brand new or perfect at this. Brand new, of course they're brand new. There's no way you're going to be perfect at this right off the bat. Right? That's part of the whole learning process. It's something brand new. We're going to fail. The big thing there is that you learn from that failure, right? And we do it quick. So I always said my kids were immediate perfection or bust, which was so funny to me. And frustrating too at times, right? So the cool thing though is that doing it wrong and doing it on purpose almost frees us up for trialing and experimentation. And we learn quick if we're understanding that that's what we're trying to get out of it. It is a learning moment. So Tableau is one of my favorite tools for that. And the reason for that is that you can bring sample data in or any data in and basically just open it up and start digging through it to see how it works. And that's a really great place to go in and actually learn how to work with data. It's one of my favorite parts about it. And the fact that it's free with local save makes it so that you can go in and actually do a lot of this learning kind of on your own or anonymous where no one else is going to see. So if you don't have it yet, go to public.tableau.com. And on the main page, there's two different drop downs. One of them has the download for Tableau Desktop Public, where you can actually download that. And then there's another one that has sample data. So I would encourage you to go in, download some sample data sets, open up your free version of Tableau Public, and literally just start dragging and dropping. Click on everything, right? Get in. And when I used to do this, so, and I hadn't talked about this yet, but I used to work as a trainer for Tableau for a few years. And when I would go in there was plenty of times where I was downloading data to work with it to learn a new skill that I was going to teach in a week. And the quickest way for me to learn that was to open up the data and actually start breaking things. And I would do it wrong intentionally because I just wanted to know what would happen the other way. And surprisingly enough, that ended up helping me learn the context around the things that I was trying to do, which made my learning curve a lot faster to where I could go from not knowing something to teaching it within a couple days. And I would encourage you to do the same. That stuff's all available. All right. Know what you need to succeed. This is a big one. And I can't, it's funny as I was reading through these, I remember thinking like, man, maybe I need more hard-hitting stuff. But I feel like this really is that. So when I started out after college, I went to art school. So after art school, I came out and I was trying to find a job. At the time, there just weren't a lot of artist jobs available. So I ended up being a freelance artist and working for myself. And one of the hardest lessons was that I didn't ask great questions right off the bat. I didn't ask great questions about what we wanted on the job, the kind of details they wanted for the work I was doing, how many revisions we could have. And then the problem with that was that once we'd agreed upon something, and there was all these excessive, edits and things like that, my dollars per hour went down with all that additional time spent. And a lot of that was because I didn't ask the right questions up front. I didn't communicate effectively. So communication first is always the biggest thing. And the second tip, which I said, no, you need to succeed, but always get context, always. You want to understand very deeply what is the desired outcome for the people that you're doing the work for. Are they going to use it just for a point of reference? Are they answering questions? Are they giving it to someone else? What questions are they trying to answer? What are they trying to do with it? What are they looking for? If you don't know that, then you will be, almost completely unable to answer the things that they want or to give them something successful, something that they can trust and work with. And that's really critical, right? Because they want that, and they're going to use that as their kind of, I guess, measuring stick for how well you did at answering their question. So that's not really setting you up for success if you don't have the information that you need to make an effective visualization or dashboard or answer, whatever that might be, right? So you need to understand that. And always, always, always advocate for yourself. If they push back, and this is common, right? I've been in this industry long enough to know that people are like, well, why do you need that? Or I can't tell you that, or whatever. That's your opportunity then to explain why you need that information. And to help them understand that like you want something that's going to be the most effective tool for you, and I can't make that without the right context. I'm going to be making it kind of in the dark or guessing, and there's a chance that I'll hit it, but it's like a 1 in a million chance that I'll get it right on the first hit if I don't understand what that is. So for you, the part that's not fair is that starts to erode the belief in your ability to actually get this done or to execute on it. And from I think it's a tangible aspect, that's when people start to download the data and actually make their own spreadsheets or do their own work instead of using the thing that you created, right? So we end up with like rogue data sets and like metrics that may not align with the corporate information. So it's just not great, right? And for you, that also slows your career growth at that point, because every success that we have is an opportunity for us to grow. And if it doesn't succeed like that, then it starts to hamper that progress. So persist. You are your own hype squad. At the end of the day, no one is going to advocate for you like yourself. So that means doing the things, even if they're uncomfortable, to put you in that position of success. All right, so we're going to move on now to some of the hard skills. And I don't mean hard as in difficult, but I mean not soft skills, right? So things that are a little bit more tactical, or things that we're going to use that are hands-on. So structure equals success. So data structure is critical as you start to work with this. And I, again, talked about my journey of artist to analyst. And when I started, I didn't have a lot of this stuff in my back pocket. I didn't know what these things meant. So I had to learn these, and this is one of those ones that stood out, was that the way the data was structured really impacted very heavily what I was able to do with it. So it's really important that we understand that going forward. So when I start a project, whether that's a woodworking project or a data project or anything, I always try to make sure I have everything that I need. Now, specifically with like woodworking projects, I hate running back and forth. And this actually happened to me this weekend, where I pulled out everything I thought I needed, and then I started the project and I didn't have everything I needed. So then I'm running back to my garage to grab the stuff I need, then back out to the project. And it just starts to get frustrating, right? It's not allowing me just to move forward quickly and efficiently with my project. And it's the same thing with data, right? We want to check that before we dive in to actually start building a dashboard or building our project, right? So I'm going to switch real quick here to show you a table in Excel. And I'm looking at this one, and it shows what we would call wide data. And wide data essentially is like data that's been built for human consumption, typically. That's usually what we see with this. And what I mean by that is that people can't look at rows and rows of data and aggregate those in their brain to understand what happened with it, right? I mean, there's probably a few people out there, but it's very rare. And typically what we see with this is columns are like date columns, and then each row is like another piece of information, or like a detail. So what you get is like, okay, this is all the information for June 6th, all the information for June 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, right? But it starts to get wide because as each of those days goes on, so does the width of your data grow. And it's also not very consumable by any kind of like application that can read information, like a Tableau or something of that nature. So instead what we want each row to be an instance, and we want each column to be details in that instance. So imagine if it was like, all right, today is my morning commute. It was 50 degrees. It took me 35 minutes. I was wearing my puffy coat and I drank a cup of tea on the way in. Like, all those are just details about my drive, right? So the row would have been that it was my morning commute. All those pieces of information would have been details that just kind of like filled in the picture or gave me a more complete picture of what was happening on that commute. Now that way would be considered longer, right? Because it's not going to continue to expand the width as we get more data, it's just going to grow longer over time with the same information. Now, that's the first thing. So we want longer instead of wider. And then beyond that, what we want standardized, consistent data. So what I mean by that is think of naming conventions. Think of how we're recording dates or the format of our currency, right? We want those things to be standard. So as we're looking at them, they can actually summarize properly. We understand what we're looking at. We don't end up with multiple fields about the same thing. I think back to when I used to work at that cell phone retail store, and I ran operations for them. That was my job there. And people would hand enter information, and we would end up with like 7, 8 different versions for the same product. And it made it impossible to look at that and summarize that data with anything that was like an application. We had to go in and manually do everything, which was super painful. So naming conventions are really important. Standardization is really important. Consistency is really important. And this is where, you hear the data people are like, you hear their gripes about what's going on with the data. And that's why, right? Because they understand going forward how that's going to impact things down the road. It's an exponential problem. So think big. Think about when you're structuring things, how you want it to work, and then start small, right? Do a little bit at a time. Think about putting in processes to make that more of a long-term play. Now, the last thing I have on here is to make friends with your data person, right? They are critical to your success in working with this. Now, most organizations too are not going to want you to go create your own data structure, your own naming conventions. They're going to want you to follow what they are doing or their corporate standard. 100% agree. Make friends with them, support them so that you understand what that looks like for them too, so that you have this successful working relationship and they can help you get what you need out of your analysis. That was one of the first things I learned, was that you need that person in your life professionally to be able to help you get through this information. All right, the right level of detail. This is our last one here that we're going to go through. And this is all about understanding aggregation and granularity. Now, think about a conversation where you've been in, and maybe it's something that you really like. I mean, for me, there's a lot of these, unfortunately. But somebody will ask me a question about it, and all of a sudden I just like blitz down this trail, and I'm telling all the details, and I'm getting way into it. Like, I can feel it. Like, I'm getting amped up, right? And I'm so excited that they want to know about this thing. I can't wait to make it their favorite thing too. And then I look up and I notice that like their eyes have glazed over a little bit, and I'm like, oh no, like I did it. I went way too deep. Like, I dove headfirst into the weeds, and I tried to drag them there with me, right? And that isn't the right thing in that conversation. I can see that. Now, you can tell when someone really wants to go there too. But I think of that when I'm working with data, right? What is that level that I'm trying to get to? How far into the weeds am I trying to go? And that's really important to understand so that we don't build it at the wrong level, or we don't aggregate at the wrong level for what our needs are for this thing. So again, this goes back to communication and understanding what was the question I was trying to answer? What's that thing I'm trying to put together? So there's 2 words there that I use though, aggregation, and the second one was granularity. So when we're talking about aggregation, it's just summarization, right? It's how are we summarizing the values? So and there's a bunch of different types, and they all have a different meaning. I'm going to go through a couple here. And really all it is, again, is just thinking about what am I trying to show with the data here? So now I said there's 2 pieces, right? I said aggregation and granularity, and those 2 things run in opposite to each other. So the more aggregated something gets, the more I summarize it, the less granular it is, the less detail there is. So I always think about like when my kids used to play with Play-Doh. They don't anymore, but when they used to, they'd break it up into all these tiny little pieces. And it went from no detail as the first lump of Play-Doh all the way to tons of details, all those little pieces that they had broken apart. So we went from very aggregated to not very aggregated, and we went from not very granular to very granular, right? So when we think about those things and we think about the aggregation would be pushing the Play-Doh all back together again. We're summarizing that up, right? We're thinking about how does that work as a unit. So that's the first one, is sum, right? That would be adding all those pieces up. Now the second one is an average or a mean, right? Now this one's an interesting one, and I really enjoy working with averages because, and I'm not going to go into all the details of this, but An average, what we're looking at is we're looking at basically the values from a set group divided by the number of those values, right? And that's going to give us our average that we're looking at. Now that can change though based on the number of things you're working with or the data that you're working with. And that's going to change what that looks like. There's also weighted averages and things like that, but I'm not going to go down that road right now. But that's another one. The next one is a median. So a median is just a middle value. So if you think about, in my example here, we're talking about commute times. If my commute times were all these different amounts, and I looked at that and I said, okay, what's my median commute time? It would literally be the value right in the middle. And if there isn't a value right in the middle, so specifically if you have a data set where it's an even number and it's 2 that are in the middle, it would be adding those 2 up and dividing them in half, and that would be your median number or your median value. All right, the next one is a count. So a count is literally just that. And to me, actually, this is one of my favorites. I know I said that like the averages too, but for me, counts are really interesting because counts are something that we use a lot with qualitative data. So quantitative data, of course, we're counting it, right? As a measure. It's, we're thinking about what that is. It is a measurement, right? It's a metric or a value. That's not a metric, it's a value. But when we use things like qualitative data, it's not typically meant to be used in that same way, but it can be when we think about that, where it's like, okay, maybe this is a category. Maybe it is like order IDs or something like that. And when we use a field like, or an aggregation like a count, we take something that was used as a dimension, as a partitioning field, and now we're saying, I want to know how many of those there were, which is really cool, right? Sometimes we need to understand what that is too. So, and I feel like that adds this new level of interest when we're working with qualitative data, because we're able to do more with it than just use it as a category or a partitioning field. And then the one that's similar to that is count distinct. And that's saying, okay, give me a distinct count of these things. So imagine, like we talked about order IDs, maybe an order has like 5 pieces. That order ID shows up 5 times. Well, if we just want to know specifically how many order IDs there are, and we just did a count, that would inflate that number because it would be showing every record. But if we do a distinct count, it's looking at unique records, and it's saying, okay, only return a count of the unique values in this. So if that order ID showed up 5 times, it's only going to count it once because that's the unique record, was that one time. The reason I bring this up, and I know I just talked about some of the details in it, but as you're working in a tool like a Tableau, and I work for Tableau, and I honestly work here because I love the tool and I love what it does. When you're in that, a lot of the way the structure works, how our summarization works, what we're showing in the view is so based on aggregation. So this is really an important concept that does need to be fully understood as you're starting to try to visualize your information. All right, we covered a lot. So, but just a quick recap so you remember what that was. Tip 1 was you belong just as much as the next person, so act accordingly, right? So, and I think on that first one I said it's Silencio Bruno originally, but essentially what that is believe in yourself, right? You belong here. Even though there's that thing inside of you saying, no, you don't belong here yet, you're not good enough yet, you do. You belong here just as much as I do, right? And I was an artist professionally. Like, if I can do it, you can do it. The second thing is get comfortable with failure and use it to your advantage. Be okay with getting in and exploring. And there's enough tools out there that you can do this anonymously that it doesn't have to be a public failure to get in and fail to learn. Tip 3, never build anything without context. If you cannot get context, you cannot get enough information, then let people know up front. I will do the best that I can, but I may not be able to hit what you need without some supporting information. I need more context. I don't build without context. I need something to go off of. Tip 4, always familiarize yourself with the data. Get in, understand it first, work on the structure, and that will help you succeed. If the data is not structured well, you will butt your head up against it the entire time. It'll be very frustrating. Tip 5, understand aggregation and granularity and the effect they have on your work. You have to understand that. If you don't, it will make it very challenging to work with. What do I do now? This is always my favorite question because there's so much stuff to do. And I'll share this out too, but there's a ton of resources in this deck. Things that I recommend are getting in and trying out our data skills program. We have so much training and resources. The second thing is download Tableau Public and download free data sets. If you haven't already, it's an anonymous way to learn without anyone else watching you, and it's free. You literally have nothing to lose. And then check out community programs. There's so many great programs in there, and ones that will help you get involved with people in the community that are a great resource to learn from. Explore the DataFam Discovery Kit. If you're not going to user groups, you're missing out. Find people that are in the same boat as you and be able to relate to what's going on. And the DataFam Discovery Kit keeps a lot of this type of information at your fingertips so that you can come back and learn. And then share with others. I know I use a lot of stories, but one for me that always stands out is that I've learned Spanish probably 6-7 times in my life, where I've gone through it long enough to the point where I should have been fluent. But there's never anyone around for me to speak it to in my immediate circles, so then it goes away, right? I'm not practicing, I'm not sharing, I'm not using it. So if you're not using it, you lose it. So you need to share with others so that you can continue to grow this skill and to make it feel more natural. All right, and then if you would love to learn more, keep an eye out. If you go to the DataFam Discovery Kit and you join that or join user groups, you will be on the mailing list, and we will let you know when there's more events coming up and more opportunities to learn. So thanks again for letting me join today. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and hope to see you guys trying out our resources soon. Thanks.